I caught my husband cheating on our anniversary, so I took my dream vacation with his credit card, and let me tell you, that decision changed everything about how I see karma, justice, and the therapeutic value of premium spa treatments. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind to the moment my world imploded, because that's where this whole beautiful disaster began. The irony wasn't lost on me that I discovered his betrayal while trying to surprise him. God, the universe has such a twisted sense of humor sometimes. There I was, heart practically bursting with excitement, clutching a bottle of his favorite wine, and wearing the little black dress he'd complimented me on during our first date 7 years ago. 7 fucking years. I'd left work early, spent an hour getting my hair just right, even put on that expensive perfume he bought me for Christmas, our anniversary, the day we were supposed to celebrate choosing each other over and over again. The key turned in the lock with that familiar click, and I could already picture his face when he saw the dinner I'd prepared, the candles I'd lit, the effort I'd put into making this night special. My chest felt warm with anticipation, that giddy feeling you get when you're about to make someone you love really happy. I called out his name as I stepped inside, expecting to hear his voice call back from wherever he was in the house. Maybe he'd beat me home from work for once. Maybe he was already planning his own surprise. The silence that greeted me should have been my first clue. But no, my optimistic brain decided he must be upstairs, maybe in the shower, maybe taking a nap after another one of his allegedly brutal days at the office. Those days that had been happening more and more frequently lately. Those days that required him to work late, to travel unexpectedly, to be unreachable for hours at a time. God, how could I have been so blind? I made it halfway up the staircase before I heard it. A sound that didn't belong in my house, in my marriage, in my carefully constructed reality. Laughter. Feminine laughter that definitely wasn't mine, followed by a voice I didn't recognize saying something I couldn't quite make out. My hand froze on the banister. That warm feeling in my chest transformed into something cold and sharp, like ice water suddenly replacing the blood in my veins. My rational mind immediately started making excuses. Maybe he was watching a movie, maybe he was on a video call with a colleague, maybe there was some perfectly innocent explanation for female laughter coming from our bedroom. But my body knew better. My heart rate spiked, my palms went clammy, and every instinct I had screamed that something was very, very wrong. I climbed the rest of those stairs like I was walking to my own execution. Each step felt heavier than the last, and by the time I reached the top, my legs were trembling so badly I had to steady myself against the wall. Our bedroom door was partially open. Just a crack, but enough to see him. My husband of 5 years, the man who'd promised to love and cherish me, who still kissed me goodbye every morning and told me he loved me every night. He was there, in our bed, with someone else. The details are burned into my memory with photographic clarity. Her red hair spread across my pillowcase, his hand tracing patterns on skin that wasn't mine. The way they moved together with an intimacy that told me this wasn't their first time. The comfortable way she laughed at something he whispered, like they'd shared 1,000 private jokes. In our bed, on our anniversary. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of nightmare, some cruel joke my subconscious was playing on me. Any moment now I'd wake up and laugh about the terrible dream I'd had. But I didn't wake up. Instead, I watched my husband, kiss another woman with the same tenderness he'd shown me that morning when he left for work. The wine bottle slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot, and suddenly everything moved in fast forward. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. Her startled yelp, the scramble for sheets and clothes and dignity that was already too late to salvage. He said my name like a question, like he wasn't sure if I was really standing there witnessing the destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life. I turned around and walked away. Not ran, walked. One foot in front of the other, down the stairs, over the wine-stained hardwood, out the front door I'd entered with such hope just minutes earlier. I made it to my car before the first sob hit me. Sitting there in my driveway, still wearing my anniversary dress, still smelling like his favorite perfume, I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, that was a given. Something deeper. Something fundamental about how I saw myself, my marriage, my entire fucking life. The tears came in waves, each one carrying a new realization. How long had this been going on? How many lies had he told me? How many times had I kissed him hello, made him dinner, shared my day with him, all while he was living this secret life behind my back? Every late night at the office suddenly made sense. Every business trip that seemed to pop up at the last minute. Every time he'd been distracted during dinner, scrolling through his phone with a little smile I'd thought was cute. Every time he'd turned away from me in bed, claiming he was too tired or stressed or whatever bullshit excuse he'd fed me. I felt like the world's biggest fool. My phone buzzed. A text from him, of course. "We need to talk. We need to talk." Like this was some minor misunderstanding we could work through over coffee. Like I hadn't just watched him betray every promise he'd ever made to me. I stared at those 4 words until they blurred through my tears, and something shifted inside me. The devastation was still there, raw and overwhelming, but underneath it, something else was growing. Something that felt suspiciously like rage. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you scream and throw things. This was different, colder, more calculating. The kind of anger that sits in your chest like a block of ice and whispers dangerous things in your ear. How dare he? How fucking dare he destroy our marriage and then try to manage the aftermath like some corporate crisis he needed to contain? Another text. "Please come inside so we can talk about this." Talk about this. Like there was anything to discuss. Like there was any possible explanation that could make what I'd seen okay. I thought about going back inside. I thought about confronting them both, about screaming and demanding answers and making a scene that would at least match the magnitude of what he'd done to me. But sitting there in my car, mascara probably streaking down my cheeks, still tasting the anticipation I'd felt just minutes earlier, I realized something. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. I didn't want to play the role of the hysterical wife, the woman scorned, the victim of his selfishness. I wanted something else entirely. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from our bank app, a spending alert I'd set up months ago to keep track of our joint expenses. He'd just made a purchase. Probably paying for dinner somewhere with his little girlfriend, or maybe buying her flowers to apologize for the interruption. I stared at that notification, and suddenly the ice in my chest began to melt, replaced by something that felt almost like excitement, because that spending alert had just reminded me of something very important. We shared everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, all the financial entanglements that come with marriage. All the financial tools that could be used for so much more than just buying groceries and paying bills. A plan began to form in my mind, hazy at first but gaining clarity with each passing second. He wanted to live a double life? Fine, 2 could play that game. But I was going to play it better. I wiped my eyes, straightened my dress, and started the car. I had some research to do, some plans to make, and apparently a dream vacation to book. After all, it was our anniversary. We should definitely be celebrating something. I drove to the coffee shop on 5th Street, the one where we used to go on Sunday mornings back when we actually enjoyed each other's company. Funny how quickly sacred places become just regular buildings when the person you shared them with turns out to be a lying piece of shit. But I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there because they had good Wi-Fi, strong coffee, and most importantly, no chance of running into my cheating husband and his red-headed side piece. I claimed a corner table, ordered the largest coffee they had, and opened my laptop. My hands were surprisingly steady now. The crying jag in the driveway had burned through the initial shock, leaving behind something much more useful. Crystal clear focus. First things first, I needed to know exactly what I was working with. I logged into our joint banking accounts, credit card statements, everything. My heart rate picked up again, but this time it wasn't from devastation. This was the rush of discovery, of finally understanding the full scope of what had been happening right under my nose. The evidence was everywhere once I knew what to look for. Charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 people. A hotel booking from 3 months ago when he'd supposedly been visiting his sick aunt in Phoenix. Lingerie purchases from Victoria's Secret, and I sure as hell hadn't received any lingerie lately. Gas station charges in parts of town he had no business being in. Each discovery was like pulling a thread that unraveled more of the lie. How had I missed this? How had I been so fucking oblivious? I scrolled through months of statements, watching the pattern emerge like a connect-the-dots picture of betrayal. Dinner dates, weekend getaways, little gifts, and tokens of affection, all funded by our joint account, all happening while I was home thinking we were in a bit of a rough patch that would work itself out. The rage was building again, but it felt different now. Controlled, purposeful, like a fire I could direct instead of one that was consuming me. I pulled up a new browser tab and started researching. First, I wanted to understand my legal options. Divorce laws in our state, property division, what adultery meant in terms of settlements. The information was dense and depressing, but one thing became clear. Even with evidence of his cheating, I wasn't going to walk away from this marriage financially whole. We'd bought the house together, built our savings together, accumulated debt together. Divorce would mean splitting everything down the middle, regardless of who'd fucked whom. That traditional path, lawyer up, file papers, drag him through court, suddenly felt inadequate. Where was the justice in that? Where was the consequence that actually matched the crime? He'd stolen years of my life, made me feel crazy and unwanted and not enough, all while living it up with someone else on our dime. A standard divorce settlement wasn't going to touch that level of betrayal. But as I sat there, sipping my coffee and scrolling through credit card statements, another idea began to take shape. Something that would be far more educational. I opened a new tab and searched for luxury travel destinations. My cursor hovered over the search results, and I felt that dangerous excitement building in my chest again. When was the last time I'd taken a real vacation? Not one of those long weekend trips where we'd argue about money and he'd spend half the time on his phone. A real vacation. The kind where you don't think about work or responsibilities or lying husbands. The kind I'd always dreamed about but never thought we could afford. The Maldives looked promising. Overwater bungalows, crystal blue seas, massages on the beach. I clicked through the resort websites, watching the prices climb higher and higher. 2 weeks at the Four Seasons would cost more than we usually spent on vacation in 2 years. Perfect. But no, that wasn't quite right. The Maldives were beautiful, but they were also predictable. Everyone went to the Maldives. I needed something more specific, more meaningful. Something that would really drive the point home. I thought about all the places I'd mentioned wanting to visit over the years, all the travel shows we'd watched together where I'd sigh wistfully and say, someday. All the Pinterest boards I'd created and never acted on because we were always saving for something more practical. The kitchen renovation, the emergency fund, his fucking car payment. Japan. I'd been talking about wanting to visit Japan for 3 years. The cherry blossoms, the temples, the culture, the food. I'd done so much research that I probably could have planned the entire trip from memory. But every time I brought it up, he'd find a reason why it wasn't the right time. Too expensive. Too far. Too weird. Because apparently appreciating a culture different from your own was weird. I started looking at flights to Tokyo and my pulse quickened. Peak cherry blossom season was just 2 weeks away. The timing was perfect, not just for the scenery, but for maximum impact. He'd know exactly why I'd chosen Japan, exactly what point I was making. But Tokyo was just the beginning. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. I started building an itinerary that would make even the most seasoned travelers jealous. The Park Hyatt Tokyo, the same hotel from Lost in Translation, a private cherry blossom viewing tour, a kaiseki dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant, the bullet train to Kyoto for temple hopping and more luxury accommodations. Maybe even a side trip to those hot springs I'd read about, the ones carved into mountainsides with views that looked like paradise. As I planned, something interesting happened. The knot of anger in my chest began to loosen, replaced by something that felt suspiciously like anticipation. When was the last time I'd felt excited about something? When was the last time I'd made plans that were entirely about what I wanted, without having to consider anyone else's opinion or budget concerns or schedule? I couldn't remember. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout my research session, text after text from him, each one more desperate than the last. I'd been ignoring them, but curiosity finally got the better of me. Please come home so we can talk. I know you're upset, but we can work through this. It's not what you think. Where are you? I'm worried. This doesn't have to ruin everything. That last one made me laugh out loud, earning a concerned look from the barista. It doesn't have to ruin everything? Too late for that, buddy. You ruined everything the moment you decided our marriage vows were more like suggestions. I typed back, I need some time to think. Don't wait up. His response came immediately. How much time? I looked at the flight information still open on my laptop screen. Departure tomorrow night, return in 2 weeks. Just enough time to experience everything I'd been dreaming about, and just enough time for him to really marinate in the consequences of his choices. 2 weeks should do it. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times, like he kept starting and deleting responses. Finally, 2 weeks? That seems excessive. excessive. The word hung there on my screen like a neon sign advertising his complete lack of self-awareness. He thought 2 weeks was excessive? What did that make his months-long affair? What did that make fucking another woman in our bed on our anniversary? I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to my travel research with renewed focus. The Park Hyatt was fully booked, but the Aman Tokyo had availability. Even better, it was more expensive. I booked a room with a view of the Imperial Palace Gardens, the kind of accommodation I'd only dreamed about before. Flight was next. First class, because why the fuck not? I'd never flown first class in my life. He always insisted it was a waste of money when economy got you to the same destination. But economy didn't come with champagne and lie-flat seats and the kind of service that made you feel like a human being instead of cargo. The total was climbing into territory that would have given me anxiety attacks just hours earlier. But now it felt like justice with a price tag. I thought about the conversation we'd had just last month when I'd suggested we book a weekend getaway for our anniversary. Something modest, maybe a bed and breakfast in wine country. He'd shot it down immediately. Too expensive, too frivolous, not the right time. Apparently the right time was when he was spending our money on someone else. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text, it was a call. I let it go to voicemail, then immediately played the message back. His voice sounded strained, carefully controlled. I know you saw something that looked bad, but I need you to know that it's over with her. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake, and I'm going to fix this. We can get past this if you just give me a chance to explain. I love you. I've always loved you. Please call me back. It was over with her, past tense. Like that was supposed to make me feel better, knowing he'd already decided to dump his side piece to save his marriage. Like I was supposed to be grateful for his newfound commitment to fidelity. I played the message again, listening to the tone of his voice, the careful phrasing. He sounded like a politician giving a damage control press conference. All the right words, calculated to minimize liability and maximize sympathy. No real emotion, no genuine remorse, just crisis management. That was the moment I realized something important. I didn't want him back. Even if he groveled, even if he went to therapy, even if he spent the rest of our marriage trying to make amends, I was done. The trust was gone, and trust isn't something you can fix with apologies and promises. Once you know someone is capable of lying to your face every single day for months, of compartmentalizing betrayal while sharing a bed with you, you can never fully believe them again. But more than that, I was done being the kind of person who accepted less than she deserved. Done being the wife who made excuses for her husband's behavior, who convinced herself that settling was mature and realistic. Done being someone who put everyone else's needs before her own. This trip wasn't just revenge, it was a reclamation. I booked the flight. The confirmation email arrived with a satisfying ding, and I felt something shift inside me. The planning phase was energizing in a way I hadn't expected. Every detail I added to the itinerary felt like an act of defiance, a small rebellion against the version of myself who would have stayed home and tried to work things out. I researched restaurants, booking tables at places with months-long waiting lists. I looked into cultural experiences, tea ceremonies, traditional theater, artisan workshops. I found a day trip to Mount Fuji that included a helicopter ride and a private guide. The price made my eye twitch, but in a good way now. My laptop battery was running low, but I wasn't ready to leave yet. This coffee shop had become my war room, the place where I was transforming from victim to strategist. I ordered another coffee and kept planning. The beauty of this approach was its simplicity. I wasn't breaking any laws. I wasn't destroying his property or harassing his mistress or doing anything that could come back to bite me legally. I was simply taking a vacation using our shared resources I had every legal right to access as his wife. The fact that this vacation would cost more than most people's cars was just detail. I started looking into travel insurance because I'm not completely reckless. Trip cancellation, medical coverage, all the responsible adult stuff that needed to be handled. As I filled out the forms, I had to list my emergency contact. For the past 5 years, that would have been my husband automatically. Now, I paused at the field and entered my sister's information instead. That small change felt more final than signing the divorce papers would. My sister. I should probably tell her what was happening, shouldn't I? She'd always been suspicious of him, though she'd been too polite to say much after the wedding. She had good instincts about people, better than mine apparently. She'd probably be proud of me for finally standing up for myself, though she might also try to talk me out of the more expensive elements of my plan. I decided to wait until I was already on the plane to call her. Easier to ask forgiveness than permission and all that. The sun was setting outside the coffee shop windows, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. It had been a full day since I'd discovered my husband's betrayal, and I felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd walked into that house with wine and hope and anniversary plans. That woman felt naive now. Sweet, but naive. She'd believed in fairy tales and second chances and the power of love to overcome obstacles. She'd thought marriage was a safe harbor, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. This new version of me knew better. Marriage was a contract, and when one party breaks the terms, the other party is free to renegotiate. And sometimes, renegotiation looks like a 2-week luxury vacation funded by joint assets. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Where are you?" His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Having coffee?" I said calmly. "Thinking. We need to talk about this like adults. What you saw..." "What I saw," I interrupted, "was my husband fucking another woman in our bed on our anniversary? I think that's pretty much all the context I need." Silence. Then, "It's complicated." "Actually, it's not. It's pretty simple. You made a choice. Now I'm making mine." "What does that mean?" I looked at the flight confirmation on my laptop screen, at the hotel reservation, at the restaurant bookings that would take me halfway around the world from this conversation. "It means I'm taking some time to figure out what I want." "Without your input." "How long is it some time?" "I'll let you know." I hung up before he could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. The last thing I needed was him blowing up my device while I was trying to finalize the details of my escape plan. Because that's what this was, really. An escape. Not just from him, but from the life I'd built around making someone else happy. From the version of myself who had become smaller and smaller, making room for his needs and his schedule and his priorities. Japan was going to be my reset button. A chance to remember who I was when I wasn't defined by my relationship to someone else. A chance to be selfish and impulsive and gloriously, unapologetically free. And if it cost him a small fortune in the process? Well, that was just the price of education. I closed my laptop, gathered my things, and headed home to pack. I had a plane to catch. I spent that entire night packing like a woman possessed, which I guess I was. Every item that went into my suitcase felt like a small victory. The silk dress I'd bought but never worn because he said it was too flashy. The expensive skincare products I'd been saving for special occasions that never seemed to come. The lingerie I'd purchased for our anniversary, well, that was definitely coming with me, just not for the reason I'd originally intended. My phone sat on the dresser, still turned off. I could imagine the messages piling up, the increasingly frantic voicemails. Part of me was curious about his spiral, but the bigger part of me was savoring the silence. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't have to manage anyone else's emotions or expectations. I didn't have to explain myself or justify my choices or consider how my actions might affect someone else's mood. It was fucking liberating. I booked a car service to the airport because taking my own car felt too reversible. Like keeping an escape route open. I wanted to burn that bridge completely, at least for the next 2 weeks. As I loaded my suitcase into the black sedan, I caught a glimpse of movement in the upstairs window. He was watching me leave, probably trying to figure out if this was a dramatic gesture or the real deal. The drive to the airport gave me time to think about what I was really doing. The practical part of my brain kept trying to intervene. This was expensive, this was impulsive, this was exactly the kind of thing we'd always agreed was financially irresponsible. But every time that voice piped up, I remembered the red hair on my pillow and told it to shut the fuck up. I checked in for my flight with the kind of giddy excitement I hadn't felt since I was a kid on Christmas morning. First class. I kept looking at my boarding pass like it might disappear if I didn't pay attention. The gate agent smiled at me with the special warmth reserved for premium passengers, and I realized I was already being treated differently. Money really did change everything, didn't it? The first-class lounge was a revelation. Free food, free drinks, free Wi-Fi, and chairs that were actually comfortable. I settled in with a glass of champagne that probably cost more than most people's lunch, and finally turned my phone back on. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages. My voicemail was full. I scrolled through the texts, watching the progression from confusion to panic to anger to desperation. The highlights included, "This is insane. You're being childish. How much is this costing us? I'm canceling the credit cards. Please be reasonable. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. Don't make this worse than it has to be. That last one made me laugh so hard the businessman next to me looked concerned. Don't make this worse than it has to be. I wasn't the one who'd made anything worse. I was just dealing with the consequences of his choices in my own special way. I opened a new text and typed, "Boarding my flight now. See you in 2 weeks." Then I turned the phone off again and dropped it in my carry-on bag. The flight itself was everything I'd dreamed it would be. The seat was bigger than some apartments, the flight attendants treated me like royalty, and the food was actually edible. I spent the first few hours just enjoying the novelty of being pampered. Then I pulled out my iPad and started learning basic Japanese phrases. Where is the bathroom? How much does this cost? This is exactly what my cheating husband deserves. Okay, maybe not that last one. 14 hours later, I landed in Tokyo feeling like a different person. Jet lag was hitting me hard, but underneath the exhaustion was pure adrenaline. I was here. I was actually here, in a country I'd dreamed about visiting, funded by the joint account of a man who'd told me it was too expensive to go anywhere nice. The Aman Tokyo was everything the website had promised and more. My room overlooked the Imperial Palace Gardens, just like I'd requested. The bed was enormous, the bathroom had a soaking tub big enough for 2 people, and the view made me want to cry with happiness. Real happiness, not the fake contentment I'd been settling for. I took a bath that lasted 2 hours, ordered room service that cost more than we usually spent on groceries in a week, and fell asleep in Egyptian cotton sheets watching the sunset over Tokyo. When I woke up 12 hours later, it was like emerging from a cocoon. I felt rested in a way I hadn't in years. Maybe it was the time change, maybe it was the distance from my problems, or maybe it was just the psychological relief of finally doing something entirely for myself. I turned my phone on long enough to check in with my sister. She answered on the first ring. "Holy shit, where are you?" "David's been calling everyone trying to find you." "Tokyo," I said, settling onto the balcony with coffee and the most beautiful view I'd ever seen. Silence. Then, "Tokyo? As in Japan, Tokyo? That's the one?" Jesus Christ. Good for you. How much is this costing him? I told her. The number made her whistle. He's going to lose his fucking mind. That's kind of the point. We talked for an hour. She filled me in on his increasingly desperate phone calls, his attempts to get mutual friends involved, his threats to cancel my credit cards, which apparently he couldn't do without my signature. She also mentioned that his little girlfriend had been calling around too, apparently worried about the situation. Like I was a natural disaster they needed to manage. After I hung up, I spent the day exploring Tokyo like a woman possessed. The cherry blossoms were perfect, exactly like the photos, but somehow more magical in person. I hired a private guide who took me to temples and gardens and neighborhoods I never would have found on my own. I ate sushi that melted in my mouth, bought souvenirs I didn't need but absolutely wanted, and took about 1,000 photos. Every experience felt heightened, like I was living in high definition after years of fuzzy reception. Was it just the novelty of travel, or was it something deeper? The freedom of making choices based purely on what would make me happy? That evening, I treated myself to dinner at Narisawa, a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant that required reservations months in advance. Somehow, mentioning I was staying at the Aman had gotten me a last-minute table. The meal was a work of art, each course more incredible than the last. I ate slowly, savoring every bite and every moment of sitting alone in this beautiful space, accountable to no one but myself. Halfway through the meal, I realized I hadn't thought about my husband in hours. Not about what he was doing, how he was feeling, or what he might be thinking about my absence. For the first time in years, my emotional bandwidth wasn't being consumed by managing someone else's needs. It was addictive. I spent the next few days in a blur of temples and gardens, hot springs and shopping districts. I bought things I didn't need simply because I wanted them. A silk scarf that cost more than my monthly car payment, handmade ceramics that would never fit in our carefully coordinated kitchen, a vintage kimono that I'd probably never wear but was too beautiful to leave behind. Each purchase felt like a small act of rebellion, against his voice in my head calling me wasteful, against the careful budgets we'd maintained for years, against the version of myself who would have talked herself out of anything that wasn't practical or necessary. The funny thing was, I was barely thinking about the money anymore. It had started as revenge, but it was becoming something else. Self-discovery, maybe, or self-care taken to its logical extreme. On day 4, I took the bullet train to Kyoto. The speed was thrilling, the scenery was breathtaking, and the novelty of traveling alone was still intoxicating. I checked into the Four Seasons because why break pattern now? Kyoto was where things got interesting. I was exploring the Fushimi Inari Shrine, walking through thousands of vermilion torii gates, when my phone rang. International number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello? Is this Mrs. Davidson? American voice, professional tone. Yes, who's this? This is Detective Morrison with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about your husband. My heart stopped. Whatever I'd been expecting, it wasn't this. Is he okay? He's fine, ma'am. But he filed a missing person report yesterday. Said you'd been gone for a week and weren't responding to his calls. We need to verify that you're safe and traveling voluntarily. I stood there among the torii gates, surrounded by tourists and the sound of temple bells, and started laughing. Not polite laughter, the kind of full-body, tears streaming down your face laughter that makes people think you've lost your mind. Ma'am? Are you all right? I'm fine. I managed to get out between laughs. I'm perfectly fine. I'm in Japan, on vacation of my own free will. Japan, Tokyo, and Kyoto. I sent him a text before I left, telling him I'd be gone for 2 weeks. This isn't a missing person situation, it's a marital dispute. I see. The detective's voice had shifted from concern to barely concealed annoyance. Would you mind calling your husband to confirm you're safe? We've got resources tied up in this case. Of course. I'll call him right now. But I didn't call him right away. First, I walked through the rest of the shrine, taking my time, processing the absurdity of the situation. He'd called the police. He'd actually called the fucking police and tried to make me into a missing person because I wasn't answering his calls fast enough. The audacity was breathtaking. When I finally did call him, he answered on the first ring. Thank God. Where are you? Are you safe? I'm in Kyoto, I said calmly. And I just got a very interesting call from the Phoenix Police Department. Silence. You called the cops on me, David. You actually called the cops because I'm not answering your texts fast enough. I was worried. You were worried? Or you were pissed off that you couldn't control the narrative? That's not, I just needed to know you were safe. I told you I was taking 2 weeks to think. It's been 4 days. You're not thinking, you're having some kind of breakdown. Actually, I'm having the best time I've had in years. I'm seeing incredible things, eating amazing food, and sleeping better than I have in months. If this is a breakdown, I highly recommend it. How much are you spending? There it was. The real concern. Not my safety, not my mental health. The money. Enough, I said. But don't worry, I'm keeping all the receipts. For the divorce attorney. Divorce attorney? Did you think I was going to come home and pretend this never happened? Did you think a 2-week vacation was going to fix the fact that you fucked another woman in our bed? We can work through this. No, we can't. We're done, David. This trip isn't me taking time to think about whether I can forgive you. It's me taking time to figure out what my life looks like without you in it. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was staying as long as I did. I hung up and immediately turned the phone off again. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or sadness. From adrenaline. From the sheer rush of finally saying what I'd needed to say. The rest of my time in Kyoto passed in a blur of temples and tea ceremonies, private tours, and perfect meals. I was scheduled to return to Tokyo for my last few days, but on impulse I extended my stay and booked a trip to the hot springs in Hakone instead. Mount Fuji was visible from my ryokan, traditional and perfect against the sky. I spent hours in the outdoor baths, looking at that mountain and thinking about how I'd gotten here. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting naked in a Japanese hot spring, having spent more money in a week than we usually spent in 6 months, I'd have thought they were insane. But here I was, and I felt more like myself than I had in years. The money had stopped feeling like revenge and started feeling like investment. Investment in myself, in my happiness, in the person I was becoming. Every expensive meal, every luxury hotel, every first-class experience was teaching me something important. I deserved good things. I deserved to be treated well, to have beautiful experiences, to prioritize my own happiness. For too long, I'd accepted less because I thought that was mature, responsible, realistic. I'd convinced myself that being practical was the same as being wise. But what was wise about staying with someone who made me feel small? What was mature about accepting crumbs when I deserved the whole feast? On my last night in Japan, I sat on the balcony of my Tokyo hotel room with a bottle of sake and reflected on the past 2 weeks. I'd seen incredible things, met fascinating people, and pushed myself out of every comfort zone I'd been hiding in. I'd eaten foods I couldn't pronounce, navigated a country where I barely spoke the language, and proven to myself that I was capable of so much more than I'd been giving myself credit for. Most importantly, I'd remembered what it felt like to be excited about my own life. My phone had stayed off for the last 3 days, but as my departure approached, I knew I'd have to face reality eventually. I turned it on to find exactly what I'd expected, a digital avalanche of increasingly desperate messages. But there was something else too. Messages from friends who'd heard about the situation through my sister. Messages of support, of admiration, of women saying they wished they had my courage. Apparently, word of my grand gesture had spread through our social circle, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. One message stood out from my college roommate Sarah, living vicariously through your badass adventure. David's been calling everyone trying to get people on his side, but honestly, everyone's just impressed you finally stood up for yourself. We never liked him anyway. How had I missed that? How had I been so isolated in my marriage that I hadn't realized the people who cared about me could see what I couldn't? I scrolled through more messages, each one reinforcing what I'd been learning about myself over the past 2 weeks. I wasn't crazy for wanting more. I wasn't selfish for prioritizing my own happiness. I wasn't wrong for refusing to accept betrayal as the price of marriage. I was just a woman who'd finally remembered her own worth. As I packed my bags for the flight home, I felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation. Sadness to leave this magical place where I'd rediscovered myself, but anticipation for the life I was going to build when I got back. A life where I made the decisions, where I spent money on things that brought me joy, where I surrounded myself with people who actually liked and respected me. The flight home was bittersweet. I'd gotten used to the first-class treatment, the space and comfort and attentiveness. But more than that, I'd gotten used to being the protagonist of my own story instead of a supporting character in someone else's. As we descended into Phoenix, I looked out the window at the landscape I'd called home for 7 years and felt like I was seeing it for the first time. The same mountains, the same sprawling city, but I was different now. Stronger, clearer, more myself than I'd been in years. My phone started buzzing as soon as we landed. Messages, calls, voicemails, the real world rushing back in. But I wasn't the same person who'd left 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't going to handle this the same way the old me would have. I had some credit card statements to review, some divorce papers to file, and a new life to start building. And if the past 2 weeks had taught me anything, it was that I was more than capable of handling whatever came next. After all, I'd just conquered Japan with nothing but a credit card and a healthy sense of my own worth. Everything else was going to be easy by comparison. The house looked smaller when I pulled up in my Uber, like it had shrunk in my absence. Or maybe I'd just grown too big for it. Either way, walking through that front door felt like putting on clothes that no longer fit properly. Familiar, but wrong somehow. He was waiting for me in the living room, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Good. The coffee table was covered with papers, bank statements, credit card bills, what looked like a printed spreadsheet. His laptop was open, calculator next to it. He'd been doing math, apparently. $37,000? He said before I'd even set down my suitcase. You spent $37,000 in 2 weeks. I looked at him sitting there surrounded by evidence of my grand gesture, and I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, no urge to apologize or explain myself. Just a calm sort of satisfaction, like checking off the last item on a to-do list. Sounds about right, I said, wheeling my suitcase past him toward the stairs. Did you include the flight upgrades? Because I ended up switching to first class for the return trip too. Are you insane? He stood up, gesturing at the papers like they were evidence of war crimes. This is our money, our savings, our future. Our money that you were perfectly happy to spend on your girlfriend, I interrupted. Our future that you torched the moment you decided to fuck someone else. I paused at the bottom of the stairs. At least I got something meaningful out of it. He followed me upstairs, still clutching bank statements. This is financial abuse. You can't just drain our accounts because you're mad. Mad? I laughed, pulling my suitcase into the bedroom, our bedroom, where this whole thing had started. I'm not mad anymore, David. Mad was 2 weeks ago. Now I'm just done. I started unpacking, laying silk scarves and ceramics and all my beautiful, impractical purchases on the bed. He watched me like I was defusing a bomb. We can fix this, he said, his voice shifting to that careful, manageable tone I now recognized as manipulation. We can go to counseling, work through our issues. There is no we anymore. I held up the vintage kimono, admiring how the light caught the embroidered silk. There's you dealing with the consequences of your choices. And there's me, starting over with a really good understanding of my own worth. You can't just throw away 7 years of marriage over one mistake. One mistake? I turned to face him fully. David, I found evidence going back 8 months. Hotel bills, restaurant charges, gift purchases. This wasn't one mistake, it was a lifestyle. His face went white. He'd forgotten about the paper trail, apparently. And even if it was just once, I continued, that would still be enough. You know why? Because I deserve better than someone who views our marriage as something he can betray and then manage his way out of. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos from Japan. Cherry blossoms, temple gates, the view from Mount Fuji. Look at this. Look at how happy I am in these pictures. When's the last time you saw me look like that at home? He glanced at the screen, then away. You can't buy happiness. You're right. But you can buy experiences that remind you what happiness feels like. You can buy distance from people who make you forget your own value. You can buy yourself time and space to remember who you are when you're not shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. I sat down on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the evidence of my transformation. That trip wasn't revenge, David. It was research. Research into what my life could look like if I stopped settling for less than I deserve. And what did you discover? His voice was bitter now, defensive. I discovered that I'm funny when I'm not walking on eggshells around someone's mood. I'm adventurous when I'm not being told my interests are weird or impractical. I'm generous and social and confident when I'm not constantly second-guessing myself. I looked at him directly. I discovered that I've been living at about 30% of my capacity because I was afraid that being fully myself would somehow threaten you. That's not... It is, though. I stood up, feeling taller than I had in years. Every time I wanted to travel somewhere you thought was too expensive or too weird, I backed down. Every time I wanted to take a class or join a group or try something new, I let you talk me out of it because it would be inconvenient for your schedule. Every time I had an opinion that differed from yours, I found a way to soften it or qualify it until it wasn't really mine anymore. He was quiet now, maybe finally understanding that this conversation wasn't about the money or even the cheating. It was about everything that had come before, everything that had made his betrayal possible. I'm filing for divorce, I said simply. My lawyer says the adultery evidence will help, but honestly, I don't even care about the financial stuff anymore. You can have the house, the car, whatever. I just want out. You're making a mistake. His voice was small now, defeated. We were happy. You were comfortable. I was making do. There's a difference. I zipped up the empty suitcase and headed for the door. I'm staying at my sister's until I find my own place. My lawyer will be in touch about the paperwork. Where are you going to get $37,000 to pay back what you spent? I paused in the doorway and smiled. I'm not paying it back. That was my share of our joint assets, invested in my education and emotional recovery. Consider it a graduation gift to myself. 6 months later, I was living in a downtown loft that cost twice what our mortgage had been, but felt like a palace because it was entirely mine. I'd used the pottery skills I'd learned in Japan to start making ceramics, selling them at local markets and craft fairs. It wasn't going to make me rich, but it made me happy in a way my old job never had. David had moved in with the red-haired girlfriend 2 weeks after our divorce was finalized. I heard through mutual friends that she was already complaining about his tendency to work late and be emotionally unavailable. Some people never learn. I kept the photos from Japan on my phone, not as memories of revenge, but as reminders of possibility. Every time I caught myself settling for less than I deserved, in relationships, in friendships, in professional opportunities, I'd look at those pictures of myself laughing in Temple Gardens and remember, I am capable of so much more than I give myself credit for. The money I'd spent in those 2 weeks had bought me something far more valuable than luxury hotels and first-class flights. It had bought me back my sense of self-worth, my understanding of my own value, my belief that I deserved good things simply because I was human and worthy of care. And honestly, that was the best investment I'd ever made. People ask me if I regret the expense, if I think there might have been a less costly way to handle the situation. But here's the thing, sometimes you need a grand gesture to break yourself out of a life that's become too small. Sometimes you need to do something so dramatically out of character that it shocks you into remembering who you really are underneath all the compromises and accommodations. My husband cheating on our anniversary was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. Taking my dream vacation with his credit card was the best decision I'd ever made, and I'd make it again in a heartbeat.